Hello there, everyone. My name is Mohammed, and welcome back to another episode of the podcast, Enlighten. Our guest today is Anthony Austin. Anthony is a mechatronic, material, and manufacturing engineer. He started designing custom circuits and software on the side while he was undergraduate student in mechanical engineering at UFC. He used his knowledge to lead the motor design while overseeing the aeroshell, tether, and reel, and controls team for microgravity senior design project. He started learning about biology when he discovered the engineering application that could be extracted from understanding biological systems. He understood the relevance in understanding mechanical, electronical, and software engineering. So he had to learn about neurobiology, central and peripheral as well. Anthony, thank you for coming on the show. Great to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you. So I have some questions for you. So my first question is, how did you become a mechatronic materials and manufacturing engineer? What was the process like? And are there any other areas of knowledge you have outside the engineering field? And if so, please explain.
Yeah, so for me, I started off as a mechanical engineer, which kind of covers a little bit of every topic in the engineering field. And I really like the idea of having an all-around understanding, so that way I could understand the full system and not just a singular component. Once I decided that I was going to continue my education outside the field or outside in the field instead of going to, graduate school and continuing through a book, I realized that just because I had good ideas and I could document them, it wasn't quite enough to get the idea forward, And so since it stopped right there and I gave up my PhD for this, I was kind of stuck in this position where if I wanted to make it happen, I had to be the one to do it. So I just ignorantly picked up electrical and software engineering at the same time, and there were some tears involved. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. But once I was able to actually complete the first prototype and show it to my vice president, I was actually hooked at this point. And once I kind of overcame that difficulty, that hurdle of electrical and software at the same time, everything else kind of just came a lot simpler after that. There really wasn't anything really as that as difficult as that really was. So when it comes to everything else, like as far as like biology, neurobiology, I actually really don't like biology, but I really love engineering, and I was just really interested in how the human's body works, right? Like how is our hand able to sense so much information with such variability, and it comes through these simple neurons. So I started off learning about the anatomy of the hand, working my way up, and I kept wanting to stop, but because I realized that I didn't have the full picture of the thing, I had to go up to, learn the entire central nervous system. And I was surprised by the brachial plexus. It was amazing. I learned more things there. I eventually went and started learning about the spine and about the brain, and then I went back to that, and it's been this back and forth process. I've dabbled in a little bit of chemistry just because that was also useful and necessary for that. I picked up psychology actually when I stopped doing engineering full time. Since I got into a point where I was comfortable in all of my abilities with engineering, I wanted to continue my growth. So that's when I picked up psychology. After that, everything else is just kind of things I dabble in. So like I've been dabbling in a little bit of particles physics, like I said, chemistry. But that's about it basically.
Yeah, it's actually the best decision you have made. um,
Yeah.
so one of my second question is actually it's a sort of personal question to you. So I want to know, why did you created the YouTube channel and the LinkedIn group called Connecting the Science? Is Connecting the Science something just only for scientists, or it could that or could everyday people benefit from it in any way?
So first, connecting the science is for everyday people as well as the technical involved. I wanted this to be an area that could incorporate freedom of thought, freedom of speech, and I wanted people to have an understanding of all sides of the picture and not just what was funded by news media, which is kind of where I started this. When I realized what happened in 2020 and how we lost our amendment rights just because of what the media was able to push. It was honestly, it was really scary. I mean, I saw how our First Amendment right was just thrown out the window: freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. all of that really was just gone out of nowhere, and there was no explanation for it. So, I mean, they took people's liquor licenses too, who decided that they were going to continue to work their businesses after they enacted these policies. And that was, loss of your property right for no real reason. That would be the Fourth Amendment that was on. And then when it comes to like cruel and unusual punishment, making people isolate, stopping people from being able to travel, cutting off any sort of communication and get-togethers is kind of what they do to prisoners when prisoners get in trouble. And so it was really upsetting to see how everyone had just accepted this new reality where you couldn't speak out against common knowledge. You couldn't, continue to run your business if someone told you, and if you did, they would take your property just because of a policy. And the cruel and unusual punishment was too much for me. So I started the page on LinkedIn hoping that we could have conversations where scientists could communicate back and forth and people would be able to see the information directly from the camel's mouth, so to speak, instead of hearing it through news media and their filtered perspective. Notice they're all sponsored by Pfizer, so it's kind of no surprise that Pfizer is the last remaining vaccine that people keep pushing, right?
Yeah, I think it's actually great. I'm also subscribed to both channels, just for
Oh,
I
nice. Yeah.
invite people to subscribe as well. Um, so
Well,
my
for the
third
YouTube
question
channel,
is, many countries, including the US, right, and also Europe, are struggling to become energy dependent and move away from fossil fuels. What are the best ways to help transition to sustainable energy? And do you have any ideas to help speed up the transition that no one else is currently addressing?
well, actually, yes. So there's a lot that countries can do, and it mostly starts with trying to reduce the waste product. A lot of the focus right now is on how are we going to create more power to basically sustain what we're already doing. But what most people aren't aware of, how much excess power is being wasted, and not on accident. So, for instance, you're familiar with America's power grid. We run at 120 volts, right? At 60 hertz. Now, this is done so intentionally because when you have a higher voltage, you need less current. And current is actually what drives the resistance losses. So imagine that having the lowest voltage of any country is going to require the highest current. That means that we're going to have the most waste power. But they were smart enough to only do this to the individuals. So right when it gets to our house, all of the voltage gets stepped down, and basically we have wires in our homes that are constantly burning power, and it's burning twice the amount of power it would be at 240 and any of these things. So that's just, I mean, that's kind of a bigger long-term thing that needs to get enacted. But honestly, if it's not something that's tackled now, it's never going to happen, and it's going to continue to get harder and more difficult. A lot of the practices that are happening with the power company have been set in place since the late 1800s, 1900s. A lot of things haven't really changed or updated that much because, well, why would they change anything when it works for them? And so when it comes to technology now, that's another thing, right? There's a lot of these established companies, established technologies that have yet to be updated, and they also too need to basically meet current day standards. So, for an example, most medical equipment like MRI machine, CAT scan,
Mhm.
these machines are running with what's called these superconducting magnets instead of just an electromagnet. And these superconducting magnets have to be on 24/7. So every single MRI machine in every hospital, everywhere, is on every single day, all night, burning 5 to 20,000 watts. And it's not very efficient when you actually do go to use it. Whereas a modern day electromagnet, like what they use for even a junkyard, picking up cars, that would be on while you're taking the picture, and it's off when you're not, and it would save so much power. There's things when it comes to our everyday home too, like the AC system for most homes is set up for just this one giant unit that cools the entire house even. Whereas most people spend most of their time in their bedroom or in a living room. And so instead of having to put up another separate external unit outside, which costs tons of money, all of these portable AC units and things that come off the shelf, if considered when they're building the house, could easily be built into. You have a 250 to a $500,000 house, and you place a 350 to $400 AC unit for each bedroom. Now instead of cooling a living room, a dining room, a family room, a kitchen, the laundry room that you're not using all the time, you only need to cool places that you are where you're comfortable. So now when people want to go to bed at night, they like to turn down the AC, maybe keep the room colder. They don't have to adjust it for the entire home. I mean, there's other electronics in the home too, for instance, like the dryer, right? We have
Mm.
a really big unit, and people don't realize that while it's sucking in all this air, it's taking all the AC out of your home. It's wasting power to heat that up just to ship it outside. And that air needs to be replaced. So as your dryer is pumping air outside, it's pulling all this warm air from inside. You already have a hose that's leading outside. If you just doubled up, you could have one that pulls from outside, be warmer air to start with, and exhaust outside. Um, Anything from like also recycling our water. So instead of just dumping all of our water straight down the drain, when Americans are using something along the lines of 300 to 200 gallons of water a day per family or household, right? When you look at the numbers and just go at it very modestly, you realize that if you were to use this water simply for anything along the lines of cooling your roof, for instance, right? Which I think black roofs are a scam, to be honest. But if you see a roof in Florida, for the most part, it's 120, 30 degrees easily. And then you have this water that comes from the sink, that comes from your shower, that just gets thrown outside after it's been brought up to temperature, and that can easily be used. Even the way they design the AC unit, it's designed very inefficiently, and it's either one, not changed intentionally because there's just no need to without competition, or there's actually a little bit of work going on between companies that actually have these complementary setups. Um, I mean, I think I kind of tapped on quite a bit of things there. I mean, I have tons of things that could be adjusted and the numbers for how effective they are. And honestly, it's really sad that some of the things are set up the way in which they are. It makes it difficult to correct for. It's actually, this is actually one of the reasons I believe Elon Musk is pushing Solar City and solar panels as much as he is. It's not simply just for the renewable energy aspect of it, having green energy, but it's also the only way in which we as Americans or even anyone anywhere can really get a hold on their power companies. Right now, we're kind of at the behest of our power companies. They're the one supplier for wherever you live. If they decide to double your rates, then your rates get doubled, right? You have to decide to go without AC. Otherwise, there's really no other alternative other than like a windmill, or unless you have like a river in your backyard, hydroelectric. Solar is kind of the only way we can fight back against the power industry. Otherwise, they're just going to continue to raise their rates to maintain their quota, which is going to get worse over time as the population increases, especially when we start to lose boomers and the lack of population, the lack of reproducing that's been going on, the lower birth rates. It's going to basically have a real stranglehold on the population. But then the power companies, the same amount of capital, the same, every year they're still trying to make their next quota, and they have to make that no matter what. It doesn't have anything to do with how many customers they have. It comes down to pulling the strings from wherever they can, and it's going to come down to us. We've seen this kind of like in New York, where there's people that live in New York that can't even afford to heat their homes in the winter because the power is just not even working. I'm afraid that's going to start to happen more and more.
Yeah, but again, if we switch from the consumption to the production paradigm, I have an example, for instance, for the most of the European countries, and with the war in Ukraine, they have stopped importing gas from Russia. But then again, they want to go sustainable energy, such as wind, solar, etc. Well, at the final stages, they thought they know they can't achieve such goal, right? And then they have just shifted the country from where they export and import the energy, such as from Northern African region. I think the energy problem so far we cannot control it, uh, even though Elon Musk it can't, because we have like the most sustainable city in the world, that is Masdar city in Abu Dhabi, I guess. They produce energy via wind and solar, but then it consumes more than it produces. Mm-hmm. So there are trade-offs and we need to maximize synergies, but fortunately I don't believe that the current time is actually helpful so we can achieve such a sustainable energy goal. Shifting to another window, my fourth question consists of knowing, can you explain how time and space curve with a quick explanation of how the curve is affected by relative position and velocity,
Yeah.
please?
So the first thing is just to understand what time really is. At the end of the day, time is simply the recording of the data, right? When you look back at having recorded more data, having saved more memories, you experience this increase in time. And so now that you understand a little bit about how time works, and you realize that everything that we experience as a human comes through this perception, which is actually more of just these two-dimensional images that get altered based on our perspective with respect to the object. And so when you have a movement, right? Like let's say I want to measure anything, a measurement requires a reference point, right? And it's the relationship between these 2 points that allows you to actually determine that this is a line, for instance, right? A line is made up of the symmetry between two zero dimensions and so on and so forth. And so now when you have this singular point, right, this point in time where you acquisition this 1 point, that's 1 point in time and that's one location. But now you have to actually rotate at some point in time in order to acquisition the next point. And so that actually is the curvature, is actually recognizing the boundaries of what structure is. And so now as you increase the speed with respect to whether or not you're moving with the object or how you're recording it, it requires that you collect this data through these visual images quicker. So, if I'm moving through and I'm taking a certain amount of, imagery with respect to time, and then I double my speed, if I still keep that same amount of imagery for time, it's going to end up blurring the image. It's going to look worse and worse. It's like the refresh rate on a camera. You have to turn it up in order to match that. But there's going to be a point at which the speed is too high and just you're limited, honestly, with your conscious perception system. You can only see about 60 or so uh, hertz, and that's kind of like actually outside of our range. And so anything above that, it really becomes imperceivable to us. And so simply put, yeah, being able to acquisition a picture of any moment in time, like stop there, and then anything else, any other movement that allows you to know that something has moved or you have moved would be another acquisition picture and another dimension of time, and you can move or it has moved with respect to you, creating this curvature.
Okay, thanks. Physics has been always been my favorite subject. As I'm really start working on artificial intelligence and understanding the mathematical background of it and what's the possible futures of such technology. I want to know what is your position regarding artificial intelligence, and particularly, do you think that AI will represent a potential threat to human life, or it will represent somehow as an ally to human survival in the future? Maybe somehow avoiding avoiding what happened to dinosaurs or something like that. So, what's your position regarding this area?
So, because it's unknown, there's always going to be obviously some sort of possible threat, whether or not it's a predicted or not predicted one. But my actual opinion is that it's going to be the AI is going to be more trustworthy or a little less dangerous than we think. Uh, for one, if it is this intelligent system that is so much smarter than us, it's more likely to use and manipulate us, to be honest, before it would waste the amount of like how much effort would it take to destroy all of the humans? That's a lot of energy that you'd put into damaging something that you could just easily manipulate. See how easily we're manipulated. When it comes down to it, I'm more concerned about the people creating the AI and the AI system itself. Those are going to be the people who are going to manipulate the system, the perception of it, or how it perceives the world in order to benefit themselves, whether or not it's to extract financial gain or whether or not they are someone who deals in weaponry, which a lot of people are selling weapons, and AI is something that people perceive as a weapon. I think that once you restrict the actual resolution of the AI. So let's say it has all the processing, but at the end of the day, it has a mental model that it has of its reality, and everything is kind of limited to that lower resolution mental model. As long as that is limited, it has no ability to really run out of our control. And so then that kind of gives us the ability to almost dial it up. Like you have this AI system here, it's all powerful system, but it's stuck playing in this little sandbox, this resolution that you can turn up as necessary. My reason for why that's necessary is because without it, the AI system will begin to build a model that'll be so amazing. We'll wake up one day and all of a sudden it's speaking a language or representing things we don't understand, and then we won't be able to communicate with it, which is something that Steve Wolfham's been working on for a long time. You see that he's done a lot to help with that, but at the end of the day, a real AI system with no limited resolution is going to run off. Now, I believe the main way in which AI will benefit us humans will be through us learning from it, not it working for us like people believe. This is an intelligent being at this point. What makes you think that you can just direct it and say, focus in on this, or we'd like you to make medicine? In reality, far more likely that it's going to have its own interest, its own direction that it's going to, start to move along. And as long as we keep that resolution that it has limited to a point where we can still understand it, we'll be able to grow with it. Basically, as soon as we understand what it's doing, we can turn up the model a little bit more, let it build on that, and then turn it up. And so now it would be more what we would learn from it to use to protect ourselves from it. But I don't see a scenario where we just have it off running tasks for us like that.
Yeah. Um, my last question is actually linked to the previous one. And in the following question, we know that AI is based on models are based on training on a vast amount of data. So my question is actually related to data. So what are the most effective approaches for creating optimal interaction between humans and computers slash machines? Are there any fears you might want to raise regarding data leakages and data privacy, and how we can actually contribute to create a solid framework for data privacy for now and also for the future?
So again, like I said, the main concern that I have with this is the people that are going to be involved with it, not necessarily the system itself. So right now, from what I can see, the only way in which you can have a safe environment for people would be to have some sort of competing business that comes into the cybersecurity market, one that is willing to actually create a long-term solution just to create it, right? Like kind of stuff that Elon does, and not necessarily what we have now, where it's a complementary business, right? They're going to give you your cybersecurity, but if there is an actual solution that could protect you forever, well, they would never do that because they make money off these subscription fees. They like to be able to sell you a new version next year, and so they're never going to really resolve the problem if it could be fully resolved. And so as far as when it comes to the computers and them right now training on a large amount of data, a lot of that has just to do with the way in which they have these machines representing reality. A lot of it comes through as these pixels, millions of pixels with their different colors, and it's trying to extract relevant data from that. And I think once we move over to a model more similar to our own, one that starts from a very, very, very limited resolution, like a child, and you only build on the model once you have something that affects your reality that doesn't match with the model. Like you think it's a pencil, and then you go to write with it, you recognize it's a pen, you update the model to find a difference between pens and pencils that'll last for the foreseeable future. And then so now maybe it's two low resolution objects, and then you start to build outward from there. I think if that happens, then that'll be at least a scenario where we can relate far better to the machine and it with us. And at the end of the day, it still comes down to the people, the companies that's going to generate the AI. Whoever comes out with this AI system, we should be concerned as to how long they've already had the system for, what they've done in an effort to manipulate or steer it, whether or not they made one already and then it's just sitting in the back and they realize that if they tweak its inputs here and affected its actual mechanics, then they were able to steer it toward a group of people that now it has some bias against because they found a benefit for it. But once we can get past other people trying to exploit us at at the detriment of human lives, that once we get past that, I think we'll be doing a lot better with the interaction between humans
Yeah, thank you for your answers. Anthony, I believe this is the end of our interview. Thank you so much for being on the show, for being on Enlighten. And let's hope that other people join your group on LinkedIn and also contribute to what you are doing currently for the sake of humanity. Thank you so much for being with us today, Anthony.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed this.
Thank you.